What's good, my friend? Bringing you a little art and history to life. Thanks for joining me on Fresberg Creates, where each week I come to you with fun facts from icons in history, along with bringing them to life with digital illustration. And today's key figure that we are jumping into is a world renowned author. You may have heard his name before. We are talking about Charles Dickens. That's right, the author behind Oliver Twist, A Christmas Carol, David Copperfield, and so much more. What you're seeing me do is bring up an image that I'm going to basically do my line art like you're seeing there on the screen as we bring you some fancy tales from the life of Charles Dickens. So I'm in Adobe Illustrator right now pulling this all together, and I've got my background layer like you're seeing there if you're kind of interested in looking at this from more of a tutorial point of view. I've lowered the opacity there so I can pretty much bring in my inking, and I've created a custom brush. So on that layer on top of the line art, I'm literally just basically putting in all the dark lines that will pretty much comprise the face of Charles Dickens. Not every detail, because you're going to see me do that a little bit later with my shading, but I'm pulling all that. And now I talked to you about what the foundation is for Charles Dickens' image right here that I'm illustrating or bringing to cartoon life. Now, talking about Charles John Huffman Dickens. He was born on February 7th in 1812 in Portsmouth, southern coast of England. Now, checking him out, he had a pretty big family. I mean, myself, I have a big family. My wife, my 5 kids, but Dickens came from an even bigger family. He was the second of 8 kids. His father was John Dickens, and his mother was Elizabeth Barrow. Kind of one of the crazy things about Charles's father, John, was he chased a lot of get-rich-quick schemes in his life. And that ended up getting his family pretty much in a hardship when it came to finance, to the point where even Charles had to drop out of school to help support his family back then, because his father John, was sent to debtor's prison. So back in the day, if you didn't pay your bills, they would send you to debtor's prison and you'd be locked up because you couldn't pay your bills. Well, when that happened to his dad, John, Charles basically dropped out of school and went to work to help his family survive during a time where they were really struggling. Now, eventually he would get back into school, but later on, I mean, times were hard, so he ended up having to drop out of school again just to help his family out, which was crazy, but all didn't go so bad for Charles, because when he dropped out of school for the second time, he ended up getting a job as a journalist and chronicling stories there in the courts in London. And that basically was his springboard to becoming an author. Now, continuing on with my springboard and pulling this all together, like you're seeing, what I'm doing in between is I'm bringing all of the shading together. I always do my shading on different layers. That way, if I don't like the shading, I can delete it and get rid of it. And then everything else, there's a lock feature in Adobe Illustrator. Like if you see the lock on my layers panel, that locks all of my other items that I like in place. So even if I draw and do whatever, I can't alter everything that I've locked down. Now, speaking of getting locked down, or some folk might say put some handcuffs or put a ring on it, that literally led to my next topic, because Dickens would end up publishing his first book, or his first works, back in what was the time frame? I'm looking here on my board. It was around 1836. He did something called the Sketches of Boz, and later on he would get married. Things were really cool for him at that point. Now, continuing on with books that he penned, one of my favorite books of all time was Oliver Twist. He released this in the early 1800s, 1837, 1838. And this novel was basically about an orphan in the streets on his own. And Dickens kind of wrote that based on his life coming up, trying to make a way for his family. So, you know, a lot of symbolism, a lot of real life experiences there. As you're seeing, I'm trying to bring some creativity and some real life to his face here. Now, one of my favorite holiday stories that was released on December 19th in 1843, and that was A Christmas Carol. I mean, many of us have seen it from Scrooge McDuck to the old school movies, that story of Ebenezer Scrooge. Well, that all came from the mind of Charles Dickens with A Christmas Carol, and even till today is a classic. Dickens would go on to publish 15 novels in his lifetime, including classics like, I've mentioned before, David Copperfield, The Great Expectations, and he would die at the age of 58 after having a stroke on June 9th in 1870. So, I mean, just a creative guy. His life was amazing. And here's my final work, creating Charles Dickens for you. I hope you enjoyed this right here on Fresberg Creates. And take a moment to find more videos like this by subscribing. And you can always search us on YouTube by using hashtag Fresberg Creates. That's once again hashtag Fresberg Creates. Voila. Oop, got a message coming my way, but that's okay. I'm done. And I'll see you next time on Fresberg Creates.